mal lungil talial silse Salvador kamal masaul no sabi el mas mamate al nga ka mo introduce tirkal togobet sel kesterkid hanggang Dr. DeRose ngi mabiil te didiul toktang tirkang amlara ngarablura California emler belaul me kora kukol nga seurgi del kirela aklatang erigidra hel dat tokora btengit sola tirga mal petokalo tengay matamo mga dura el alsil selo giutial wave radio direct tirga tutaw etemla raskura mijenti emane ungila result tra el dura tutaw ma direct betok schedule til mora kakroso school te direct mora Palau High School direct mora STA School direct Emau School Madagay school invited el sel long evaluore a 1:30 ang public invited malolong itel kumiyar sa marubak marbekla ad mera 1:30 ra mayong adire ang kamo mga tudul mar toktang ra aklol hospital matirkel el private el toktang era direct long evaluore ra 11:30 to 12:30 so kom mal maungil loreng se ngungira betenget ungira balwad ma kmongutial te alengol msanga Dr. DeRose mongkukmo o malko ay kel girel malko ngi mangkalbi il toktang mal masulang.
Yeah, it's really a privilege to be here, and for my wife and I, we've enjoyed the warm hospitality of the Palauans. And we're just very excited because what we're finding is helping people in the United States, is helping people throughout the world. And we know these things will make a difference here in Palau, so we're really excited to be able to have a chance to really teach people, to share, to answer questions. So my wife Sonya and I, we've had the privilege of doing medical work and helping people for many years. And maybe we'll start just with a practical illustration. Sonya, we've seen people with serious medical conditions make changes in their lifestyle. What's been impressive to you about what happens when someone understands how to cooperate with the way they were made and how they start really getting interested in their health?
Well, it's just always amazing to me, but yet predictable in a sense, to see people when they make lifestyle changes and start eating healthfully and incorporating these lifestyle habits of proper healthful living, how it can change them, how their health can improve so dramatically, and diseases can often be completely reversed. People can get off of diabetic medications with normal or much better blood pressure control. They can get off high blood pressure medications. It's just really exciting to see people be able to make these improvements.
So what's fascinating, though, is a lot of times people would say, well, there's so many health problems in my family. There's so many health issues. What kind of lifestyle should I be on? Do I need to be on a cancer prevention diet? Do I need to be on a dementia prevention diet? Maybe my father had dementia in his 50s. Or maybe he had Parkinson's disease. Should I be on the Parkinson's preventing lifestyle? And so people hear about all these diseases that run in the family. They hear about things in the community, and they get confused. They say, well, what should I be most concerned about preventing? The beautiful thing that we find is that there are some simple, practical things people can do that can prevent the risk of all these conditions. And we've been speaking of it lately in terms of something that we call the Methuselah factor. Now, Sonya, a lot of people have heard of Methuselah, but if they haven't, just where do we get that name from?
So Methuselah was a character from ancient Mediterranean, Middle East, who was the longest living person known on Earth. He lived to be 969 years old. And so we know that we don't have any lab work from Methuselah, but we know that he must have had good blood fluidity.
Yeah, so this is what when we talk about the Methuselah factor, like Sonya mentioned, we're talking about things that help our blood flow better, make our blood fluidity better. And a lot of lay people say, well, what is that all about? What are you talking about? We're talking about a science that is showing us if we improve our circulation health, not only do we decrease our risk of conditions that may be predictable. You say, oh, you're going to improve your circulation. That will help your heart. Well, sure. That will help your brain. That will, help prevent stroke. But Sonya, what other things are connected with improving blood fluidity?
Actually, it affects every area of our body. Even cancer has been shown to be decreased and less metastasis if blood fluidity is increased, is improved. And for instance, if your blood can flow properly, and let me just back up a little bit and explain. In our body, as you know, there are millions of blood vessels. The tiniest ones are called capillaries, and they're so small that each red blood cell has to actually fold in half in order to go through them. And it's designed that way on purpose so that there is optimum contact between the blood cell and the cell and the lining of the cell, the artery vessels, to exchange oxygen and nutrients, etc. But if your blood is not flowing well, if it's not the fluidity is not good, the blood cells can't even get through. They get stiff for various reasons. We can talk about that more, and they can actually back up. They don't go through those tiny capillaries, and the circulation is not as good. So you're not getting the nutrients delivered, the oxygen delivered, the waste products taken away, and it makes it more likely for metastasis of the little microscopic cancer cells to set up housekeeping there, and metastasis is actually increased.
So basically we're seeing this connection. It's not just with cancer, heart disease, and stroke, but it's also with mental performance. So people that are worried about dementia, or people say, my memory isn't as good, if they can improve their blood fluidity, they actually decrease their risk of having problems with mental clarity, but their mental clarity actually improves. So we can actually measure it. So they take people and they measure their blood fluidity. And if you improve their blood fluidity, they will think better. They will take tests better. So for students, we had the privilege of speaking to some students today. We were talking with them about these lifestyle principles because they can help them be better students. We can talk with people in business. If they want to be sharper, more, basically when they hear something, they just really connect all those dots, make those best decisions. You want to have optimal cognitive powers, and that's what we're talking about, improving blood fluidity. What I think is especially interesting, and Sonya and I, we've talked about this before, is people that are healthy, they often say, oh, we don't need this. This is for my grandma. This is for my dad. We're young, we're healthy. Well, they may be concerned about how they're doing in work or how they're doing in school, but they don't realize that physical performance is also related to blood fluidity. They've studied athletes. If an athlete improves his or her blood fluidity, their muscular strength is better. Their endurance is better. We can actually measure things like grip strength, actually improved if we improve blood fluidity. So really all this tells us, Sonya, if we want to live longer, if we want to live better, if we want to prevent disease, then we want to improve what we call in the medical community hemorrheology.
That's right.
And because that's so complicated, people say, hemo what? Hemorrheology. We find people can't remember that, a lot of people. So we say, just call it the Methuselah factor. We're talking about the science of blood fluidity. So Sonya, what's something simple that someone can do to improve their blood fluidity? Just one thing.
One simple thing is to drink more water. If our bodies are made of about 70% water. So it's really important that we consume enough of that, because that will help to keep our blood more fluid.
The amazing thing is just about every other beverage, every other commonly consumed beverage. We're not talking about like a medicinal herb tea or something, but most every commonly consumed beverage worsens blood fluidity. So take, for example, any beverage that has caffeine. If someone's drinking caffeine, they say, well, I need that, Dr. DeRose. I don't get enough sleep. I count on having caffeine in the morning. Now, Is this common here in Palau as well? Do people like their caffeine? Okay. So it's just like in the United States. So now some people are listening or viewing and they're getting uncomfortable. They say, I hope this doctor doesn't tell me not to have caffeine. Well, I'm just trying to point something out. The way caffeine works is it interferes with biochemical processes in the body. Some of them affect a compound called adenosine. Now, most lay people, they have no clue what is adenosine. But adenosine does a number of good things. It actually helps the platelets, the clotting cells in the blood, to be less sticky. So you take caffeine, and that increases the stickiness of the platelets. And like Sonya was saying, that then affects blood flow. So it's true the caffeine raises your stress hormones. That'll help get you going if you're tired. But you pay a price, and that affects the flow of blood. So really interesting stuff. Goes back many years. They studied typists, and they gave them caffeine. Did it make any difference, Sonya, to them?
It did indeed. So they took a bunch of typists and gave them a paragraph to type with no caffeine on board. And so they type it out. Then they give them caffeine and have them type the same piece again. And yes, they could type it some faster, but they made more mistakes. However, it was not random mistakes that they made. They made the same mistakes that they habitually made when they were learning to type. And so we now know that caffeine actually facilitates the pathways of bad habits in our brain.
People don't realize this about habits, but habits are actually, like, as Sonya pointed out, pathways in the brain. You can think of it as, well, I see a lot of beautiful plants and things here in Palau. It's probably hard to keep a trail in Palau. If you don't keep walking on it, what'll happen? It'll get overgrown, right? Because there's so much, you have a lot of rain, a lot of growth. Well, it's similar with your brain. If you keep going in a certain direction, if I go from stress to a cigarette, every time I'm stressed, I smoke a cigarette, in my brain, there's literally a pathway going from stress to cigarettes. If I change my habits, there's still the remnants of that path. Over time, it can get some, weeds growing up, but there's no huge trees that are there. So it's easy to go back down that old habit pathway. And if we take caffeine, it makes it easier to slide back down those old habit pathways.
In fact, some researchers have called caffeine bad habit glue. We've actually seen it too in helping people to stop smoking. We have seen this over and over. If they don't give up caffeine as well, they have a harder time giving up smoking, and they're much more likely to go back to it afterwards. Whereas if they give up caffeine, they're much more likely to be successful.
So here's the message. Caffeine has problems with our blood fluidity. For that reason, it's not good. But a bigger concern, like we're talking about, is how it affects us behaviorally. And what Sonya and I think, are most concerned about today in America and in the world when we speak about health consequences, most people talk about health consequences from about here down. Most people are not talking about how healthy choices affect our brain. This is very, very important, especially as we look at epidemics of dementia, behavioral health problems, suicide, depression. And why this is so interesting is a lot of people say, oh, you can have caffeine, alcohol, all those things. They really don't affect you that much. But people, when they say that, they're not thinking of these mental and I would say even moral effects. And why this is so important is today we're dealing with a lot of issues, really, whether you talk about the United States or anywhere else in the world, where people are having brain health challenges. So when we talk about this Methuselah factor and blood fluidity, we're talking about things that can help with mental health, but on top of that, we're talking about something that can help people with some of the worst chronic diseases they're dealing with.
So true. I'm sure in Palau here you have the same chronic diseases we do in America. High blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, high cholesterol. It affects all of those.
Yeah, so let's bring this now to another perspective. It ties some of these things together. we're going to be talking in some of our lectures, including with some of the health professionals here in Palau, about something that we call the brain health revolution. And we say basically there's so much so much science coming out about mental health that there's virtually been a revolution in how we look at the brain and the things that we do that can impact it. One of the compounds that we've gotten very interested in is something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Now, Sonya, that's a mouthful. BDNF, what does that mean, even just the term for it?
Well, brain-derived means that the brain makes it. Neurotrophic, neuro refers to nerves, trophic refers to growth. So it's a compound made in the brain that facilitates nerve growth.
This is a fascinating compound because what we've learned is if you can raise levels of BDNF in the brain, you can decrease your risk of dementia. You can decrease your risk of Parkinson's. You can decrease your risk of addictive processes. You can even really decrease your risk of something we call ischemic stroke. That's one of the common forms of stroke. So it's really powerful stuff. So you say, well, what can we do? Is there anything we can practically do, Sonya, that would improve BDNF levels? Do we know anything about this?
Yes, there are actually. One thing is intermittent fasting.
This is really a fascinating topic. They've looked at a lot of studies now in both humans and in animals about what happens when you decrease caloric intake. When the brain doesn't get enough caloric intake, doesn't get enough calories, actually the brain is stressed. Now, Sonya, is stress good or bad?
It depends.
It depends. Wait a minute. Most people say, I don't want stress, that's bad. You're saying it depends? Break that down for us.
Well, some stress is helpful. I mean, you need to, if you never felt any stress, maybe you're not going to be motivated to do things, for instance.
Let me ask you this question as we're talking about it. If I want to build stronger muscles, well, let's say this. Let's say I'm going to run in a marathon race. We were just visiting in Guam with someone who had just run a marathon. Sonya, do you think that in order to prepare for that 26-mile race that he laid in bed for about a month so he was well rested up?
I don't think so. If he did, he wouldn't do very well on the marathon.
So what did he do? He stressed his muscles.
That's
so he
right.
stressed his running muscles so that he would be in a better position to run that long race. So he was training. So stress in appropriate amounts can actually help us be stronger. This is true with the brain. So if you stress the brain with caloric deficit, in other words, you're not getting enough calories to the brain because you're fasting, the brain makes BDNF. It makes brain-derived neurotrophic factor to help the brain. And that helps the brain in multiple ways. So one of the ways that we can help ourselves is this, like you said, intermittent fasting. Another way we could say it is not overeating. Avoid overeating. And a lot of people in America haven't gotten this message. In Palau, are they doing better? Do they not overeat ever here? They overeat here too. Okay.
I think it's a worldwide problem. But they've done studies in, I believe it was rats, where they decreased the caloric intake of the rats, and if they decreased it 25%, the rats tended to live about 25% longer. They decreased it about 30 or 33%. The rats tended to live like 33% longer. Now, granted, if you decrease it 100%, you're not going to live 100% longer, but there is a balance.
Yeah, so the point is, whether you look at longevity, whether you look at brain health, one of the things that's actually killing us in the world today is caloric excess. So although there are still people dying in the world from starvation, there's millions of people that are dying from caloric excess. And some of the worst things are things that are concentrated calories. This is a surprising one to many people. Because I ask people, I say, in America, I say, do you know what one of the highest calorie sources in the American diet is? If someone knows their nutrition, they'll say, well, it's fat. And that's correct. Fat has 9 calories per gram. But many people are surprised to learn that there is something that has more calories than pure sugar. You take pure white sugar, it has about 4 calories per gram. Nearly twice as many calories per gram in alcohol.
Yeah. 7 calories per gram.
That's right, 7 calories per gram in alcohol. So alcoholic beverages are one of the things that are contributing to the obesity epidemic. But it's not just because they have calories. It's because of where alcohol works. Where does alcohol first affect us, at least on a neurochemical level?
Its very first effects are on your frontal lobe. So it affects your judgment, your insight, your wisdom. Before you have enough to even notice someone that is drunk. It affects your mental function, your morals.
So before I went into medical school, I had a job as a young man, and that job was working in a restaurant. And in the restaurant where I worked, it was a, quote, fine restaurant. They would, like many restaurants today, probably here in Palau as well, we were just in a restaurant. They didn't do this in the restaurant I was just in here, but it's because they weren't serving any alcoholic beverages. But in many restaurants, what's the first thing they ask? Would you like something to drink? Now here's what we find. In the restaurant where I worked, the alcoholic beverages were the largest source of revenue. So they made the most money on the alcohol. But there's something else interesting. We've seen this in the medical research. You take a little bit of alcohol and it affects your judgment. So let's say you have a weight problem and a problem with sweets. If you've had a little bit of alcohol in that restaurant, when the waitress comes and says, would you like dessert? A little bit of alcohol now. Here's the scenario. You say, no, I'm on a diet. I can't have the dessert. And then the waitress says, but we have a special today. You buy 2 desserts and you get 3. If you had a little bit of alcohol, you might say, oh, yes, I'll have the 2 desserts. Okay, so alcohol affects judgment. And because of that judgment effect, we actually know people that are controlling their weight by trying to control their overeating, if they have a little bit of alcohol, not only do they get the calories from the alcohol, they're also more likely to overeat. Sonya, we know that there's some other things that help raise levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Tell us about this whole area of what we sometimes call environmental enrichment. Can you illustrate what that looks like for us?
Well, we can use an example of, say, a pet hamster or a pet mouse or rat. I don't know if they ever have those pets here and like that in Palau, but in America they're fairly common. And so if you have a rat in just a little cage and there's just, a food dish and one of those exercise wheels, that's not a very stimulating or enriching environment for the rat. And they've done studies where if they put a rat in a more natural environment where they can dig and explore and have things to other things to do besides run on a exercise wheel, their brains make more of this BDNF.
And what's so interesting about this is right now we're offering people in Palau an opportunity to raise their BDNF levels by caloric enrichment. And what we're going to do tomorrow, from 1:30 to 3, we're going to be at the Cultural Center. And we're going to be sharing things like this that are going to challenge people. Now, someone might say, well, I'd rather go to a lecture where they just say everything I'm doing is good. I want to hear that my beer is good for me, my caffeine, coffee is good, all my bad habits are good. I'd rather go to that. Well, that's not environmentally enriching. Environmental enrichment comes when you're challenged, you see? So people should come hoping that they hear a lot of things that they haven't heard before. And they should invite their friends, say, you got to hear this because you're not going to believe what these doctors are talking about. So it's going to be really exciting. We're going to help people. So even if they don't like what we have to say, it's going to help their BDNF levels. Isn't that good news, Sonya?
That is good news.
Well, we got to talk about one other thing, actually 2 other things that affect this BDNF because it's so important. One is we have to talk about exercise. And physical activity is so important. One of the things it does, it raises BDNF levels. But Sonya, I'm really interested in exercise too because of the effect that it has on blood sugar. Can you tell us just a little bit about exercise and diabetes?
Exercise is very important in helping to control diabetes. a moderate walk or getting a 10 minutes of light to moderate exercise after each meal will help to lower your blood sugar and keep it in a better range. Exercising on a daily basis, where you're getting cardiovascular exercise, that can help. It helps increase your metabolism. It helps control your blood sugar as well.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. When exercise is part of a comprehensive lifestyle program, we find it can literally save people's limbs.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about diabetes. You know, a lot of people, I was just speaking with a health professional not long ago, and they were talking about all the patients they had who had lost limbs from diabetes. Often it starts with a problem called neuropathy. Mm-hmm. Sonya, tell us a little bit about what neuropathy is and how it often presents.
Well, neuropathy, neuro refers to nerves, and pathy refers to illness or problem with it. So neuropathy is a problem with your nerves. And in diabetes, it's a very common thing for people to lose sensation in their feet, usually starting in the toes and then working its way up the foot and up into the leg. And because of that, people, you know, we often say, oh, pain is not a good thing, but pain is actually a blessing, because if you can't feel anything, you can injure your foot and never know it. We've had patients who were walking around all day with a tack stuck in their foot that went through their shoe, and they didn't know it till they saw blood on their sock when they took their shoes off at night. And then it gets an infection, and it doesn't heal well. Often these people, and then as the circulation gets even worse, many times people end up with gangrene, and they have to have their legs amputated, or their toes, part of their foot. Sometimes multiple amputations, going higher and higher.
So one of the interesting things we found, we did research some years ago at trying to help people with diabetes who had neuropathy, and really a lot of the improvement came down to this Methuselah factor, improving circulation, improving blood fluidity. There were a number of things that we did. We put them on a diet that included lots of plant foods. In other words, getting away from all that meat and all the saturated fat, the lard, the fried chicken, the chicken nuggets, these kind of things. So getting them on, some good plant foods. Then we also had them drinking lots of water. Okay, we got rid of the caffeine that makes the blood fluidity worse. No alcohol. Now a lot of people are saying, "Boy, where did you find people who make all these changes?" There's a lot of people that are motivated to get help, and they were actually coming to us. That we were running a center in the United States, so it was helping with this. But then we also did something called contrast hydrotherapy. Sonya, tell us a little bit about this hydrotherapy and what contrast hydrotherapy is.
So that is a treatment where you're using water, and you're having warm water and cold water, and it's especially important with anyone with diabetes that you use a thermometer, so the water temperature should not be over 104 degrees, because if your sensation is poor, you can burn yourself and not even know it. So that's really important.
So now we're talking 104 Fahrenheit.
Degrees Fahrenheit,
do you use Fahrenheit or Celsius here? Your temperature? Fahrenheit?
Fahrenheit, okay.
Okay, so 104.
So 104 degrees, and so then you say you're trying to do contrast treatments for your feet. So you'd have two containers, maybe 5-gallon buckets, or in the center, other containers. You have the warm water in one and the ice cold water in the other, and you soak. So you put the feet and legs in the warm water for 3 minutes, and then you transfer to the cold water for 30 seconds or so. Then back to the hot water for 3 minutes, then back to the cold. Do that 4 or 5 cycles. You always start with hot, you always end with cold. And what this does, it dramatically increases the blood circulation. The heat dilates the blood vessels, brings more blood in. The cold constricts the blood vessels, so it helps to push that blood out, and the alternating contrast of that dramatically increases the blood circulation, and it can really be beneficial in helping to heal.
So some years ago we had a series of 30 patients with severe neuropathy, and we measured their symptoms. They actually scored their symptoms, how bad they were, how numb they were, how much pain they had. They would score their symptoms at the beginning of a program. We'd work with them for about 2 weeks, and then they'd score their symptoms 2 weeks later. We found on average they improved their symptoms 20 to 45%. And so this is really exciting for people that are concerned about their diabetes, their complications. And really what we're doing is we're improving this blood fluidity. So we're improving this Methuselah factor. So it's really exciting. So we kind of bring this back. We're talking about the brain, and you say, well, Dr. DeRose, you're jumping around. You talk about the brain, then you're talking about diabetes, you're talking about, you know, amputations. Well, the whole point is all these things are interrelated. And it's so beautiful. We don't have to say, I'm sorry, you got diabetes. We can't put you on the cancer prevention program because you got diabetes. You got to go on the diabetes diet. No, the same diet that helps diabetes helps high blood pressure. Sonya,
cancer.
And cancer, right, and dementia. We got so excited about this that a while ago, I recorded a series of videos. They're free videos on YouTube. We called it 30 Days to Natural Diabetes and High Blood Pressure Control. We use these principles that we've included in our book, The Methuselah Factor. And someone can just go there, go onto YouTube, and they can get a 30-day program that will help them with their blood fluidity, it will help them with their blood pressure, help them with their diabetes, and it won't cost them a penny. All it will cost them is just watching a 5-minute or so video each day.
And following the principles that you outline in there.
Okay, Sonya is exactly right. You can watch the video, but if you don't listen to anything I have to say, you're exactly right. It won't help you, will it?
No.
Let's talk. Well, good, yeah.
Just before you go on, I wanted to tell you an experience of one of the patients that came to the Lifestyle Center where we were working, or Dr. DeRose was working, my husband, who came there for help. He was a diabetic. He was in a wheelchair. He said his doctor had told him that this was his last chance. He could try this. They were planning to amputate both his feet because his neuropathy was so bad, his circulation was so poor, that he was going to have both legs amputated. And he did not want to do that, and he said, let me try this first. So he came to the Lifestyle Center, and he was gung-ho. He did everything. He went on the plant-based diet. We did the hydrotherapy treatments with him. He did the exercise, the whole package. He, in 18 or 19 days, however long the program was, by the end of the program, he was climbing the stairs. He was walking 2 miles a day, as I recall. It was absolutely amazing to see the transformation in this man, and so rewarding. Yeah,
so we say it's never too late to get some benefits. Now someone says, well, I've already had both my legs amputated. Can you help them grow back? Well, of course not. But the point is, there's other complications, there's other problems that could be waiting for you down the road, and we say it's never too late, never say never. It's surprising to many of us as health professionals how many people just take it for granted. Oh, well, you know, my kidneys are failing, you know, I got heart disease, I have congestive heart failure, well, I might as well just keep doing everything the same way I'm doing and just not worry about it. That's not the way to look at it, because there's so much that we can do with lifestyle that can make a difference.
That's right.
So we're talking about brain health, we're talking about chronic diseases, but we've got to talk about one of the things that I feel is most neglected in most clinical medicine conversations. I'm a public health professional as well, so I have a master's degree in public health as well as a medical doctorate degree, an MD. And when I go to the public health conferences, I notice they talk about something that most doctors don't talk about, and it has to do with social connectedness. Sonya, why is this so important?
It is amazing how much this makes a difference. When you have friends, when you have connections, when you're sharing with others, when you're doing something together to make a lifestyle change, it is so powerful. And it's amazing how much it improves our health.
What's shocking to us today is, you know, folks in society today say, I'm more connected with the world than I ever was before. Someone lives in Alabama in the United States, and they say, I have a friend on Facebook in Ghana, and another one in Thailand, and even one in Palau. But they've never met those people. And I said, well, if your car breaks down, which of those friends could help you? You know, there's nobody. So I'm not saying there isn't value in connecting with people in these using technology, But technology is often taking the place of relationships. And whether you look at high blood pressure, very interesting. If you have less social connections, you will tend to have more high blood pressure. If you develop cancer, this is from the Nurses' Health Study, big study in America done by Harvard University. They looked at women who were diagnosed with cancer. They found these women, this is breast cancer, they found those women, regardless of what stage of cancer they had, early cancer or very late cancer, even if it had spread, if they had more social connections, they were more likely to survive and also to thrive. So
That's right.
you can look at this across the board. You can look at it, like I said, blood pressure, you can look at cancer, you can look at all kinds of measurements, but science is telling us we need to connect with real people. So I love to go to places like Palau, where we're meeting with people, where we have these public events. And I tell people, oh, sure, you can go online and you can watch the doctor from, Harvard or Stanford or Oxford or, Beijing University or wherever you think the great experts are. You say, why should I come and hear Dr. DeRose and Dr. DeRose there in Palau? And I say one of the other reasons you should come tomorrow, for example, at 1:30 at the Cultural Center is because you want to come not just to listen to the lecture, but look around, see who else is there. And if you don't have friends who are there, make some friends from the people that are interested in improving their health. Because the science is showing us if we want to be healthy, we want to choose friends that are interested in their health.
That's right.
So you're my friend, aren't you?
Definitely.
Yeah. And Sonya helps me with my health. We've been married together for almost 30 years. Our 30th anniversary is coming up very soon. And being with someone on a daily basis who values her health has been invaluable to me. It's helped me. We're not fighting. She isn't saying, David, why aren't you eating more pork? Why do you not have me try to eat more pork? Because I don't eat any right now.
Well, it's just not a healthy food for you.
Really? But, in America right now, this may not be true in Palau, but in America right now, there's a big push on putting bacon on everything. Do people like bacon in Palau?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Some people say to me, bacon is really good. I say, don't use the word good, use the word tasty if you like how it tastes. It's really not good for you, like Sonya said. It's got this saturated fat. Why is saturated fat a problem, Sonya?
How long an explanation do you want?
How long an explanation? Give us a few sound bites here.
Well, saturated fat, let me back up. You've heard the saying, you are what you eat. It's literally true, because when you eat saturated fat, that fat is incorporated into every cell of your body. Every cell lining is made of fat. And so when that saturated fat is in the cell linings, it makes it stiffer, just like saturated fat is solid at room temperature, whereas, say, olive oil or another polyunsaturated fat like vegetable oils is liquid. The saturated fats are solid at room temperature. So when you eat it, it makes your cells more stiff. They're less flexible. This makes it much more difficult for the insulin to bind to the insulin receptors and to get the insulin into your cells to bring the blood sugar out of the bloodstream into your cells. It's like trying to open a rusty door. It takes more force to open that door with rusty hinges. And so it takes more insulin to get the sugar into the cells. Over time, this is what causes diabetes, because your pancreas after a while wears out and can't continue to overproduce insulin to overcome the resistance that is caused by the saturated fat in your diet.
So saturated fat makes our cells more resistant to insulin, sets the stage for diabetes and its complications. But it's worse than that, because the saturated fat also becomes part of our brain cells. And if the brain cells have more saturated fat, then actually what happens? It makes those brain cells, those neurons, stiffer, and then the neurotransmitters, the chemicals that the brain uses to talk back and forth to itself, those neurotransmitters cannot work as well. So whether you talk about dopamine or whether you talk about serotonin, the so-called feel-good neurotransmitter, these things don't work as well. So what we tell people is, yeah, the bacon may taste good because you're used to eating it, but it's not helping your body. And so we say eat less of those things, eat more of the plant foods, and you'll have better health, better brain function. Let me mention something else, because I think this is something that we often forget about. A lot of people, as they look at health, they think so much about what their genetics are. They look at what's in their family. They say, everyone in my family died from a heart attack at 55. I'm going to die from a heart attack at 55. What people who say that don't realize is we don't only inherit genes from our parents, we tend to inherit, if you will, behaviors. So if you want to die like your parents, then live like your parents. But if your parents died early, you should be looking at what you can change. Don't say it's in your genes. Be determined to do something better. And we'll be teaching people as we continue our time here in Palau things they can do better to live, as we sometimes say, in this Methuselah Factor theme, we'll teach you how to live sharper, leaner, longer, and better.
You mentioned about blood fluidity in social connectivity is some ways to reduce chronic diseases such as diabetes and stroke and high blood pressure. How do you, how can you acquire that blood fluidity, or how do you increase it to be as part of your daily health?
No, it's a great question, and that's what we do in the book, The Methuselah Factor. We actually give people a 30-day program to improve their blood fluidity, and it includes things like drinking more water. It includes regular exercise, eating more plant foods, avoiding so much sugar, because sugar adversely impacts our blood fluidity. We talk about certain foods that are better to eat more of. And one of the ones that we like to talk about are beans. Why are beans so powerful?
Beans are a powerhouse. They're a wonderful food. They're full of both carbohydrates and protein, and lots of fiber, as well as lots of other healthy compounds. So they help to regulate blood sugar. They help to stabilize it so it's not having the peaks and the drops. There's nothing quite like beans.
And they improve blood fluidity. So here's some other things that we do in the book. Now people are going to hear this, they're going to say, I've heard this before, but we look at the science behind this. We say every 7th day, we recommend you take a day of rest. Now some people hear that and they say, I think I've heard that somewhere before. What's really interesting to me is you look at most every culture in the world and they're on a 7-day week. You look at many religions, whether you look at the Jews who keep what they call the Sabbath from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, or other Bible-believing Christians who say, well, that's the Bible Sabbath. Or you look at Catholics who say, and many Protestants who say, well, we keep Sunday as a day of rest. Or you look at Muslims, and many of them say Friday is our day of rest. But it's interesting. There's a physiology behind this. And in our modern world, many people just work every day. We say the medical evidence suggests that we should take a day of rest, 1 day in 7. So as people go through our 30-day program in the Methuselah Factor book, or if they go online to the free videos, they go through the same principles, we say every 7th day, take a day of rest, because rest is also part of what we need to have optimal blood fluidity.
what is your address online? Is it on YouTube or what?
Oh, okay.
What's your website?
Yeah, the easiest way to find my materials is to go to our website. And so our website is pretty easy to remember. It's Compass, like giving you direction, COMPASS, then the word health. So it's a compass pointing you to health, compasshealth.net. And we tell people you can remember it's .net and not something else because we're using a net to fish for the best solutions for your health. So compasshealth.net. If you go to our free materials section, you'll see a link right to the YouTube page that has all of the videos and everything. That's probably the easiest way for people to find things.
This may be the last question.
Mm-hmm.
Many plants have been diagnosed with cancer, and there are people in cancer stage 2 or stage 3 cancer. If they go on this blood fluidity concept, would they be able to stay away from the drug that they're taking to help them in their illnesses and stick to the Methuselah concept?
No, this is a great question.
They can cure?
Yeah, so let me tell you about an interesting study that helps answer the question, but only partially. Some years ago, they looked at women who were diagnosed with female cancers. They measured their Methuselah factor, their blood fluidity, before they had surgery for ovarian cancer or cervical cancer, different female cancers. They found the better their blood fluidity, the less likely they were to have spread of the cancer. So we know from the research, studies like that if we can improve blood fluidity, we can improve cancer survival. But your question is a bigger one than that. It's not just can the Methuselah factor help us with cancer. I think the answer is yes. But can it be a substitute for doing conventional therapy? I would say at this point, from what I've seen, the answer is, I would say not yet. And the reason I say not yet is if someone has a cancer that's diagnosed and the doctors say, we can really help you with great treatments, 90% success rate, I would not want to discourage someone from doing something conventional if it had good success. But what I get worried about is where the doctors tell someone they should have chemotherapy and radiation, and when the person really asks the doctor, well, how much is this going to help me? The doctor says, well, it might give you an extra month or two. This is not a reason to use these powerful drugs and treatments. Often people feel worse than better. So I always tell my patients or people that counsel with me, talk with the doctors recommending the treatment and say, what kind of difference are we talking about? Is this a cancer that responds very well to some of the things you're recommending? In that case, you probably want to do that and do the Methuselah factor things. If someone says, if the doctor says, we're talking a few months different and doesn't think it's going to help your survival, then I would say you want to think seriously about whether you want to do that or not, and then just do some of the natural things. And it's not just the Methuselah factor. There are specific things that can be done for specific cancers. There's a lot of research that's going on with natural therapies. Give you an example. Some years ago, I had a patient with a blood cancer, and we looked into some of the natural research, and we found there was a natural compound, an herb, that was helping this cancer. And so we gave her that herb, and indeed, as we measured her blood work over time, she made improvement just using something natural. So that's more than just applying these general Methuselah factor concepts, but definitely we'd want to follow these things as well as individualizing it for any cancer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ngari.
Yes, probably the last thing I'd like to leave people with is there's good news. We hear a lot about disease. We see people around us getting sick. We get concerned. But we can make a big difference by making better choices. If we understand how to cooperate with our bodies, how to cooperate with what I believe is a loving Creator who made us, we can have better health. And whether you come to our lecture tomorrow at 1:30, we really hope you can be there, or whether you go to our website, compasshealth.net, you're going to find material that can help you on your journey to better health.
Ang laure nga sole la tirkal terul lubegal DeRose. Ang laure nga sole me Salvador. Aktio maklat karigi del adrapway. Mer maas, mar magikaril mar magikaril til. Klugo ke mo tagangal mera ngara mayon cultural center taklong matedob the luter meng sa ay gel guk tirka kaldung el kirela togora betengede en malungil merki del sel su musisi abetenge darat mabalbad mendire kalmo musisi komal mesulang